Well, thanks very much for coming tonight. Can you all hear me okay? Yep. Great. So I'm going to talk about the most powerful force in the world. And of course the question is, what is the most powerful force in the world? If you guessed a nuclear bomb, that's a pretty good guess. The first question is, well, how powerful is a nuclear weapon? If we take that as the modern nuclear weapon, for example, the Tsar bomb let off by Russia, and we scale that down to the size of Hiroshima, how big do you think I'd have to scale that? That small? That small? That small? That small? Where do we stop? Well, see that little wee tiny dot in the corner? I had to magnify that by 10 times so you could see it. That's actually that cloud shrunk down to the size of Hiroshima. Pretty scary, isn't it, when there's 100,000 of these things they were going to make? So a nuclear weapon is pretty powerful. In fact, when that one went off, the Tsar bomb, the light was so bright it outshone the sun, went all the way to the moon, reflected off the sand of the moon, came all the way back to the earth, and made nighttime daylight. The shock wave made an earthquake that went around the earth, all the way around the earth, and back again, and carried on 3 times. That's a pretty powerful force. But I think there's something even more powerful than a nuclear weapon, and I'm going to talk about that today. And that is beliefs. Let's think about September 11. The pilot sitting on the front of that 767 with his hand on the joystick, flying closer and closer to the Twin Towers, to certain death. What drove him on? It was a belief. A belief that not only killed him, but 6,000 odd other people. And we can scale that up by a massive amount if we want. Think about World War II. There we have a belief system, for example, Nazi Germany. And in Nazi Germany and the rest of World War II, I think the number I've got here somewhere is there were 85 million people killed, 85 million souls. That photo that looks like a pile of coal is actually the shoes from the Jews that were gassed at Auschwitz, just one of the camps. Again, a belief. But of course, beliefs aren't always bad. They can also be good. But the trouble is, we look after our nuclear weapons, we protect where they're stored, we protect who has access to them, but we seem to play fast and loose with beliefs. Anyone can believe anything. You can believe what you like, and I can believe what I like, and I've got my right to believe anything I like. The problem is, when a belief doesn't match reality, then something happens. Society pays a cost. So I think we need to be very careful looking after the thoughts that run through society. Imagine this little girl was someone you knew, maybe your daughter, maybe a niece, someone really special to you. And imagine somebody came up and tried to take her away and harm her. Well, you'd do everything you possibly could to protect that girl. You'd strain every muscle, wouldn't you? And yet, in Africa, there are thousands of men who believe the cure for HIV is to have sex with a young girl like that. Now that's a belief that has catastrophic consequences. More damaging or equally damaging is someone physically harming your child. So just as you would strain to look after the child, we should strain pretty hard to look after beliefs and make sure that they match reality, because obviously that's not how you cure HIV. So the question is, how do we make a change to beliefs? How do we go about changing beliefs and making sure they do match reality and they are the right thing? Well, there's 2 ways of going about it. One is from the top down and one is from the bottom up. Let's talk about the bottom up. Bottom up is if you want to make a change, you get lots of people, you go out on the streets, and one-on-one you do what you need to do. And that's a very good way of doing things. It's very effective, The other way of doing it is from the top down, where you make some sort of global philosophical change that somehow affects society. And to put that into perspective, let's consider global warming. So, for years, scientists wrote lots of papers, and they published lots of journals, and they had lots of meetings all around the world. And to be honest with you, nobody really cared. Didn't really make a difference. Went on for years and years. And then, of course, Al Gore came along and wrote a movie, An Inconvenient Truth, which suddenly captured a lot of attention. It was on the Wall Street Journal, etc., Time magazine. And so there's an idea of a top-down single intervention that made a big difference. And, of course, there's now a big debate. So both are needed, top and bottom, but sometimes top's better than bottom, and sometimes you need the top and then follow it up with the bottom. Another example of a top-down change would be, an accidental top-down change, would be the movie, what is that movie called? Hunger Games, that's it, I forgot it. Hunger Games. And so you have a heroine who shoots a bow and arrow, and of course, you know, she's quite the hero. And then the unexpected consequence, of course, is that now if you try and join an archery club, you can't get in, whereas they're full. Whereas if you'd actually gone out and advertised for archery and said, archery's cool, come and join an archery club, it would never happen. So here you see the idea of a top-down effect, accidental, in this case, from a halo effect, making a change to society. So another example of making a change is our sports stars. So here you have an NBA player, and so you've got something like the Gatorade ad for Mike Jordan. You know, drink Gatorade and be like Mike. Because we all look up to these sports stars, and if, you know, Mike Jordan drinks Gatorade and we drink Gatorade, well, we're somehow there. And they pay these sports stars tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. Why? Because it's effective. So now the question becomes, what sort of thing would we like to change? Well, let's just stop for a minute and have a look at some statistics in New Zealand. Now, these are from the recent OECD report. I don't actually want to read them out, they're so bad. But you have read of them yourself for a minute here. Hard to imagine. I got this off the OECD report. So I don't know if it's true or not. That's just what they reported. Pretty horrendous. So how would we change that? What would we do? That's a good question. And even could we change it? And of course, the crime doesn't just have statistics. 8,000 violent crimes and 5,000 house burglaries every single day in the UK. And this statistic just is mind-boggling to me. In the US, every single day, 300 women are raped. That's 1 every 5 minutes. I just can't get my mind around that. The sheer scale of these numbers just beggars belief. And if you think of the cost of crime, in the US, it's estimated, and again, these aren't my numbers, these are economist numbers, 1.7 trillion US dollars per annum is the cost of crime. And in the UK, it's about $146 billion. Now, that's real money. That's money that could be spent on education, could be spent on health, could be building swimming pools in your local community. It could be doing all sorts of good things. But it's money that goes absolutely nowhere. And we end up filling up our jails. I mean, here's one of the pictures of a prison in America, packed to the gunnels, just crammed because we focus on locking up the criminals and the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff rather than how do we cure the problem at the top. Of course, you look at something like this and you go, well, what can I do? What can we do? Sitting in our little room here in Lecture Theatre B05 to make a slight dent in this. Is it just a wishful dream? You see, for me, it's not academic talking about ethics or morals. The rubber hits the road. Is this something we can actually do? Let's not debate ideas and woolly things. So let's try and look at some examples where a big change has happened in society. One example would be car accidents. So for a long time, cars were designed and built by the car companies, and they pretty much just ran by market forces. Then in about the mid-60s, Ralph Nader came along and he wrote a book, I think it was Unsafe at Any Speed. And he really took the automotive industry to task over safety. And it was particularly triggered by one of the cars, the Ford Pinto, that if you crashed into it, it just burst into flames. And here's a picture of another Ford Pinto in flames with people trying to put it out. So he wrote a book and took it on the top level and said, you need to make cars safe. And one of the things that came out of that was what's called the NCAP rating. Cars are rated on their safety system. So some cars get a 1-star, some cars get a 3-star. And all of a sudden, safety became an issue. Because if you built a car and it was a 1-star safety car, guess what? People didn't buy it. So suddenly, the whole game of market force changed just by putting in a rating system. It's really simple to understand. You don't have to be an engineer to understand how the crossbeam pillars work and how everything else works. You get a star, 2-star, 5-star. I'll buy the car. And of course, once the star rating system came in, and once customers became very concerned about safety, white cars' design changed drastically. You suddenly have all sorts of crash structures built underneath your car that you're probably not aware of. You have airbags everywhere, you have anti-lock brakes, you have collision avoidance systems. Suddenly, the whole car has changed. And what's the impact of that on society? Well, if you crash a modern car into a great big hulking old Chevrolet, guess which comes off worst? The Chevrolet. A modern little car will survive much better. That accident was survived. Unbelievable. So people now survive crashes that they would have been killed in before. So here's an effect of the impact of that intervention on car crashes. You suddenly see a massive reduction in car deaths as a result of this whole initiative for safety. We no longer let the car companies have free rein. We bring them accountable by the safety ratings that they have. So there's an intervention that's worked, and there's something in that that'll help us with morals. Notice also that if you look at your modern home appliances, they have a different sort of rating system, a 5-star rating system for energy efficiency. And again, if you're going out to buy a washing machine and one says 3-star and one says 5-star and they're the same price, I know which one I'm going to buy, the 5-star. So what does that do? It makes manufacturers all change their game. Now, we could have gone from the bottom up. We could have gone out and banged on Fisher & Paykel's door and says, we need to change your insulation techniques. We need to change the way that the microprocessor idles when it's not being used. We could have gone from the bottom up and tried 1,000 interventions and 1,000 regulations. And we would have probably failed. And we would have got very tired going from manufacturer to manufacturer, trying to work so hard on all the little things we need to do. But we made it real easy. Stamp. 5 stars. Get where I'm going? Maybe you can. I do a lot of work with Olympic athletes, and I've got a little program I run with the New Zealand government where we design high-tech sensors for our elite athletes, all kind of secret squirrel stuff which we hide away inside the rowing boats and the cycling stuff. And but one of the things I'm really helps in making athletes better is measurement, obviously, and having an objective measure. And what you want to do is look at what's the most significant factor that's going to affect performance. So if we take our team pursuiters here, and we actually measure, for example, the distance between them during the race, and we do some detailed modelling, we can work out exactly how far they should be for optimal drag, minimum drag, and we can work out where they are. Very simple numbers. And we can then make an intervention, and sure enough, we get a great result, and suddenly they win a medal. An objective measure, and you can see where the intervention worked. So let's go back to our OECD report and say, well, what can we do about that, given that we've just seen how an intervention can work? Well, I'm going to quote two people here, and I'll read them out because these are good quotes. The most important human endeavour is the striving for morality in our actions. Our inner balance and even our very existence depend on it. Our morality and our actions give beauty and dignity to life. And then Theodore Roosevelt, if you educate a person in his mind but not in his morals, you create a menace to society. So how do we get morals into society? Because the world has changed. The church is no longer the central focus. They're no longer the place that delivers those sorts of things for us. So what can we do? Well, one of the things I've come up with in a little idea is what I call the moral scale. Very simple. So if you start off with me, and my actions are all about what's good for me, then I'd call that a level 1 action. However, there's people around me who are important to me, and of course I might want to do things good to them, because if I'm good to them, they'll be good to me. So that would be kind of a level 2 action. And then of course there's people I know who maybe aren't important to me, but again they're going to have an influence on me. And then there's people I don't even know. Now why should I be good to people I don't even know? Well, that takes a lot more moral development, doesn't it? And then ultimately we take it right to the very outside, level 5. Our actions are based on what's good for society as a whole. Now, if my actions are good for society as a whole, that covers almost everything. It covers environmental concerns. It covers paying my taxes. It covers, you name it, it covers it. It covers global wars. So if you suddenly say to yourself, let's think about today, all my actions. Where did I act today on that scale? When I put this in my little book, The Ant and the Ferrari, one of the editors of HarperCollins said, gosh, I got thinking about that, and I thought today I did something that was a level 2. She said, I'd never thought about that before. And I kind of stopped me in my tracks, and what could I do to be a level 3, 4, or 5? And it's a bit like the energy rating system or the NCAP system. It's kind of a reference. And you see, the thing is, maybe everyone here operates at level 5 because, well, you've come out tonight because you're interested in reason and passion. But I tell you what, that's not how most of society operates. We've only got to go back to those OECD statistics. You've only got to walk out on the streets at night and you'll see that very few people operate at anything other than level 1. You also watch TV. I can't watch TV anymore because I've got like 100 and something channels and I can't find anything to watch. But if you do watch it, what you'll find is that what are the messages given on TV? What are most of the programs? Most of the characters act at level 1. Very, very few act at level 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. If you have a scale like we've just mentioned, the moral scale, it kind of reminds you on a daily basis. So if our cars didn't have speedos, we'd be all over the speed. I know I would because I like driving fast. But every now and again I look at my speed and I go, oh wow, okay, I'm doing 160, whatever, I should slow down. So having a scale reminds you just at the back of your mind that actually today I need to change that behaviour. And it's such a simple little concept, it's so easy to get across. Imagine if every school child left school with just the simple concept of a moral scale. Something as simple as that. Doesn't take a big initiative for teaching. It's not going to clutter up the curriculum. It's a message that can be just promoted over and over and over again. So instead of, we look up to our wonderful All Blacks and we all want to be able to tackle harder and do all these other things, imagine if we all came out of school aspiring to be fit for society. All came out level 5. And wouldn't that be great? I can't understand why that's not a core deliverable of all our kids. It's not difficult. You see, any time you make a complicated initiative, it will fail. Going back to the safety thing, 5 stars, that's simple, I get it. I don't have to put a whole lot of stuff in there, real simple. There's lots of benefits of this idea. Now, if he realizes that Dad's behaviour was level 1, And actually level 1 is not normal. You see, the problem is he's been normalized to think what Dad's behavior was normal. So he goes on to perpetuate that behavior. I know it's not quite as simple as that, but you can see the whole idea. You suddenly reset his expectations. And I know when I first started trying to race motocross, I thought, yeah, I'm doing pretty good here. And I was going around the track one day, and I think it was a New Zealand champion lapped me. And as he lapped me, he jumped right over my head. And I thought, okay, I need to recalibrate my level of goodness. He's on a different scale to me, because I went over a jump, and he went over my head. And so, again, having an ability to recalibrate and having a scale is really, really valuable. So, the moral scale. It's really simple. How are my actions? Is it about me? People important to me? People, etc. We can tune that, we can change it, but it's just something that I think is really powerful. One of the things I'd like to do is set up what I call the Knights Institute, which I'm working with some of the top knights in New Zealand and dames, and we're going to try and get this initiative off the ground to actually try and get this thing going in New Zealand society. Because wouldn't it be good if New Zealand was the first society in the world that operated or aspired to operate at level 5? And the other good thing is, if I just go back a slide, you see, if you make a change and you've got objective measures, you can see whether your change has been effective. I can see that the athlete did what we wanted them to do. If you can measure people's behavior, even roughly, even if it's not that scientific, but you've got an idea, you can make a change and see if it works. Another thing that I'm doing, which was nicely mentioned, is I'm putting together a movie on Einstein. And this is, I'm working with Sir Ian Edgar, from one of the top people in New Zealand, who's my partner. And one of my old business partners in the UK that I worked with was 3 times World Formula 1 champion Sir Jackie Stewart. And we're putting this movie together. It's called Einstein's Compass. And I think it's important as well. And I'll just give you a quick introduction to the movie, if you like. It's going to take a second. So the title comes from a scene before the movie starts, the prologue, set in 1884, where a little boy who's 5 years old is in bed, and he's got glandular fever and he's bored, and his dad comes in and gives him a compass to play with. And the little boy plays with the compass, and Dad looks at him and walks out and thinks nothing more of it. Just a little kid playing with a compass like you did and I have done, probably. And yet, that one little boy in 1884 changed the life of every single person here. That little boy was Albert Einstein. And he couldn't understand how the needle moved without something touching it, because normally things move when something touches it. And so for him there was a mystery. Now, there's 2 metaphors from this little 20-second scene at the beginning of the movie. The first metaphor is, his dad did something and he never knew the consequence. He gave him a compass, and he died before Einstein was famous, and yet your life, this computer here is a result of Einstein. Your cell phones, every DVD, every Blu-ray, everything, all came from him. The 747s wouldn't fly without him. It's very strange. Black holes, cosmology, all came from that little 5-year-old boy. So that's the first metaphor. That sometimes we do something and we have no idea of the consequence. But if we act at level 5, then sure as eggs are eggs, the influence will spread. The second thing, of course, with Einstein was that he saw a mystery where nobody else did. And that's really important. We've all probably played with a compass and never saw there was anything mysterious there. And so one of the things we want to do in the movie, of course, is raise that whole sphere of the mystery and the beauty. And the movie has 3 main characters, of course, Einstein himself and these 2 people. And the gentleman on the right is the professor of correctness. He does, this is perfectly, it's 100% factual, 100% historical. He does everything that's correct at great personal cost to himself. Professor Max Planck. And without him, Einstein probably wouldn't have ever been discovered. On the other side, we have what I'll refer to as Dr. Evil. And doesn't he look like Dr. Evil? And he plays the opposite character, and again, there's a battle between these people, good and evil. So the movie is not only a fantastic historical thing, it's not only wonderful characters that you get to see actually who Einstein really was and what he did, but this whole idea of ethics and morals is played out on the large screen, and hopefully, like the Hunger Games, makes people think. I nearly finished my presentation. Sorry, I might have gone over a bit longer. In fact, I'll just finish there. Just want to give you this little quote from Albert Einstein in 1949. He died in 55. And so at the end of his life, he sat down and he thought. In fact, I'll let you. Shall I read it for you, or do you want to read it yourself? Read it. So this is what he just wrote one page at the end of his life, and he said, this is really what it all comes down to. How strange is the lot of us mortals. Each of us is here for a brief sojourn. For what purpose he knows not, though sometimes he thinks he senses it. But without deeper reflection, one knows from daily life that one exists for other people. First of all, for all those upon whose smiles and well-being our happiness is wholly dependent, and then for the many unknown to us, to whose destinies we are bound by the ties of sympathy. I like this. 100 times every day, I remind myself that my inner and outer life are based on the labours of other men, living and dead. And I must exert myself in order to give in the same measure as I have received and am still receiving. Isn't that beautiful? There's a bit more. It's all on one page, but I couldn't fit it on in the PowerPoint. I've never looked upon ease and happiness as ends in themselves. The ideals that have lighted my way and time after time have given me new courage to face life cheerfully have been truth, beauty, and kindness. I like the word kindness. Love is one of those words that's easily confused. But to be kind, wow, what a lovely thing. Beauty, of course, that's really wonderful. This whole idea of what is beautiful, and that's the magic in life. And truth, of course, well, I'd like to talk about that for another 2 hours, another day. Without the sense of kinship with men of like mind, without the occupation of the objective world, the eternally unattainable in the field of art and scientific endeavours, life would have seemed empty to me. Now here's a guy that revolutionised the world. At the end of his life, he came to that conclusion. The trite objects of human efforts, possessions, outward success, luxury, have always seemed to me contemptible. In the last paragraph, it was the experience of mystery, even if it was mixed with fear, that engendered religion, a knowledge of the existence of something we cannot penetrate, our perceptions of the profoundest reason and the most radiant beauty, which only in their most primitive forms are accessible to our minds. It is this knowledge and this emotion that constitute true religiosity. In this sense, and in only this sense, I am a deeply religious man. He called himself a religious unbeliever, which he said was a rather unusual term. I'm a deeply religious non-believer, I think was his exact words. I am satisfied with the mystery of life's eternity and with the knowledge, a sense of the marvellous structure of existence, as well as the humble attempt to understand even a tiny portion of the reason that manifests itself in nature. And I think if we can engender in our kids this sense of wonder, I don't see many people in awe. Awe is one of those things you just don't see anymore. I hope my movie, you just come out awe. If our kids can leave school not having learnt Pythagoras as a boring theorem, but they learn something that's mysterious and wonderful with a hunger and thirst for society, they will be, with knowledge, they will be better people. If they come out with that moral scale, they'll be better people. So I could go on for ages, but I know I've got 20 minutes, so I'll stop there. And look, I'd love to talk about anything you want to talk about. Any questions?